Namaskar, this is my 46th lecture, although one video got a little problematic. So you have to watch this in the context of the previous 43rd, 44th, 45th, because we are using psychoanalysis to understand identity. Again, this will be a little bit repetitive, but I have to do it in order to fully anyone grasp the complexity of the problem. So we talked about one identity, and I responded to Mr. Asad, who is very strong, or at least performing very strong in his Muslim identity. He's a Bangladeshi Muslim. So let us try to understand this with a little bit more theory of performance as given by Jean Rivera, who was a psychoanalyst, probably trained under Freud. To do that, let me again recall some of the gender identity development, and we went through it before. So I said that according to Freud, development is guided by the pleasure principle or the libido. It passes through different stages in the body, the oral stage where all the pleasure is obtained from sucking the baby. Then the anal stage, all the pleasure is obtained from the passing the feces, and then the genital stage where pleasure is obtained through masturbation. Now, according to Freud, there is no identity, no sense of, because for him, the only identity is the gender identity. That's the basic. It's only here that identity develops. That's too under a threat, castration complex, according to Freud. What is very special about this developmental phase? In this developmental phase, the child has an idea that he will get infinite, unbounded pleasure. And there is a vague concept of the other in relation to which the pleasure is obtained. Some people call it, although Freud never actually said it, some people say it's the phallic mother, the other who's giving me care and nutrition, milk and food and so forth, and taking care of me and my bodily existence. Now, it's under a threat that we develop a strong identity. So the little boy thinks that his organ of pleasure, the phallus, will be cut off. So that's a threat. So he consolidates his identity and he puts a boundary to that fantasy of infinite pleasure. I cannot have infinite pleasure because if I ask for that, then my organ will be cut off. And it's all, according to Freud, who is an atheist, it's all biological. It comes from within, it's all organic, and it will be cut off. And so if I want some pleasure, I have to also put boundary on the pleasure. This is how rights work. We can't have infinite rights over everything. If we want rights, we have to give up some rights. Laws are boundaries. So he develops his consolidated male identity, but his desire for that infinite pleasure for the phallic mother, who is a fantasy mother, which is again depicted in the divine and so forth, goes in the unconscious. So just as the conscious consolidated identity is born, the unconscious is also born. I also said that with the female identity development, it's a little different and more complex. At this point, again, the female knows that she doesn't have the phallus, the organ of pleasure. But this is Freudian. So she goes to father to get the phallus. She doesn't give it. So she substitutes her original desire for a desire for a baby, for father or father substitute. But her search for the phallus, the organ of pleasure, goes into the unconscious. So the feminine unconscious is the desire for the phallus, which she doesn't get. If she doesn't subliminate that, repress that, and substitutes it with a desire for baby from father or father substitute, according to Freud, she has two other abnormal identities. One is frigidity. Since I do not have the organ of pleasure, the phallus, I won't have any pleasure at all. Or homosexuality. Father has given me the phallus, which is a fantasy. So I have the phallus. And he says that this is the homosexuality part. Now, Ernest Jones interprets it differently. What I said so far, I have already discussed in my previous videos. You can watch those. Now, Ernest Jones gives a little bit different explanation of the Freudian theory of female homosexuality. female homosexuality for Freud is one of the deviant identities, those women who cannot sublimate their original desire for the phallus and substitute it with a desire for baby from father or father substitute. They think they are living in fantasy. They think they have the phallus. Father has given them the phallus. Here, father is very metaphorical. It probably is divine, at least in the Abrahamic religions, which is the context that Freud is writing in. So Ernest Jones says there are two types of female homosexuals. One who has the subject libido, one who has the object libido. I talked about this earlier because it's always either I have something in the self or in the other. So Ernest Jones says that some of the women, they adopt femininity in their body and they still desire the other as the masculine, because these are plays of opposites. Are they really opposites? We'll talk about that later. Develops in the other. They still desire the male with the phallus because that's their unconscious desire, but they cannot stop complaining about the male, their injustice and so forth. There's the other homosexual who has adopted masculinity in their body. I have the phallus. So, and they don't need the other. They enjoy femininity not in the self, but in the other as father would do. So they adopt father's identity. This is very crucial and very subtle. Either they think they adopt femininity in the self and their other, because if you have a self, you have to have the other. If you have black, you have to have white. If you have tall, there's someone who's short. So it's always the other. So masculinity or the possessor of phallus, and it's much more complex, but for now I'm saying masculinity, the possessor of phallus is the other. I'm desiring the other, but I'm also complaining about the other's injustice. Or the other type of homosexual, according to Ernest Jones, this is not Freud, they adopt the masculinity, the phallus, I have the phallus in the self, and they enjoy femininity not in the self but in the other, like father would do. So they desire other women because their fantasy is I have the phallus. Now, this difference is very important because Jean Rivera, the French analyst, probably a student of Freud, I'm not very sure, she develops her theory around this. She says femininity is really performativity. What is this? Let us try to understand. So Freud said femininity is, what is femininity for Freud? It's the unfulfilled desire for the phallus, the organ of pleasure par excellence, which they repress and substitute with a desire for phallus from baby from father or father substitute. So the baby is the woman's phallus. So femininity in Freudian definition is the desire for phallus par excellence. Jean Rivera says, no, femininity is not the desire for the phallus. It's the femininity is a performance of femininity. What does that mean? So when someone is desired something, they lack it. I desire water because I lack water. Once my thirst is fulfilled, quenched, I don't desire water. So there is a lack. Freud defines femininity as a lack. She doesn't have the phallus, the organ of pleasure, she desires the phallus, because we only desire, as I said, what we lack. Jean Rivera, taking from Ernest Jones' two types of homosexual women, says femininity is not the lack, which is why our desire is never fulfilled. Femininity is not a lack, but it's the performance of lack. What does that mean? What does that mean to say it's a performance of lack? Let us try to understand it. Suppose a person, a slave, a woman, or whoever, she can do her work very well. She knows how to do this, say, a very complex mathematical problem. But if she shows it to the master, then the master will take revenge on her, saying, you don't need me. You don't need to be dependent on me. You already know. And he will take his revenge. So in order to not to get that revenge, not to be punished, she performs as if she does not know it. She performs stupidity. And according to Jean Rivera, taking from Ernest Jones, she says, yes, there are women who are both very good at traditional masculine jobs like repairing car and mathematics and so forth, but they also are very good with their feminine identity, which is the type of bisexuality. Most women are bisexual in the sense because they flip-flop in their identity. They perform as if they don't know anything. Why? Because if they show that they know, then they will receive that punishment from father, that you have castrated me and you have stolen my phallus. All these are metaphorical. So the femininity is not the lack of a phallus, as Freud said. According to Jean Rivera, femininity is the performance of lack so that they can get by in a society. So she's pretending to be stupid, but actually she owns the phallus. She knows the truth. But it's only through her performance that she's stupid, she doesn't know, etc., that she is getting by in society. Because if she says, I have the phallus, I know, there will be a revenge taken by father. Oh, you've stolen my phallus, you've castrated and stolen my phallus. You have to take all of this metaphorically. Now let's apply this to the Ashrafi and the Ajlabi Muslims. And especially we are talking about Asadullah, who is an Ajlabi Muslim. According to Sina and Dasgupta, where they make this distinction, they said they are refugees evicted from their own society and cultural world. Why? Because they're converted. These Ajlabi Muslims are refugees. They were constantly tutored those ideas, and those gradually grappled them within 1 or 2 generations. This deculturation is the area for which the ex-Hindu Indian Muslims could have been severely exploited by the alien invaders who are also converted. So see, what they're doing is, we can take this and apply psychoanalysis here. They're performing exactly like the woman. She knows that her core, there is no lack. She doesn't lack anything. Or everyone lacks the perfect phallus, which is actually the idea of divinity, the perfect identity. Who has perfect identity? We are all queer. We are a mixture of many things. But that ideal of the perfect consolidated male identity is a fantasy, because even within the male there is the unconscious which is going to haunt him. So always there's going to be something haunting his conscious. No one has a perfect identity, absolutely calm, bodhisattva. No one has that. The absolute yogi, who is never perturbed because he doesn't have an unconscious to haunt him. See, here his unconscious is his ex-culture and the culture he's living in, and it's going to haunt him. And that's why he has to perform like the woman who performs so that he doesn't get that revenge. He has to perform his identity doubly. He has to perform his Ajlabi Muslim identity. He's an Ajlabi. He's queer in that sense. His identity is flip-flopping. And so he has to perform. Some women, we have seen and we have read that they perform their masochistic identity more. There are stories like that, widows who can't stand their condition and they're performing more, they're doing all the rituals more. This is all performance to repress that hatred against society that's coming out. And this is what's happening to them, because they're also traumatized from that deculturation, because they're refugees in both cultures. And so this is again performance. It's not real. Their performance has to be more. They have to be more Muslim than, say, an original Muslim for whom that repression has been very long, 10, 15 generations and so forth. So they don't have to perform. And also it's the birth of the original. Is there anyone who is original? Probably not. Only probably our fantasy of the divine. Again, it's a very difficult concept. The perfect masculine or the perfect feminine, nothing of these exist. Most of it's performance, but in this case, the performance is more so that what they have repressed, their culture, their refugee status, their deculturation, and their hurt, their melancholia, and we're going to talk about mourning and melancholia. It's will come back and haunt their conscious mind. And so their performance and the consolidated Muslim identity, just as men have to perform. See why men have to perform more masculinity is because they're unconscious that they repressed their original fantasy mother, the phallic mother, and everything they've repressed, and it's going to haunt it because nothing is repressed. And so they have to perform more, which is what Asadullah is saying. He's going on repeating. And through continuous repetition, we actually adopt what we perform as real. It's not real. When we are at workplace, we are performing very docile and I'm listening to the boss. But when we come back home, we are probably bad-mouthing the person. But there we are performing and we have to perform more. Many people who change their genders, they put on makeup and they perform more feminine than the woman who's already a natural woman. So these are important points and we will build on them and we will talk about mourning and melancholia of Freud and then we'll apply it both to identities and to our partition. For now, that is all. Please subscribe, comment, like, and also look at the course on genocide. We'll apply psychoanalytic theory and United Nations definition of genocide, etc. in our course. That is all for this video. Namaskar.